Hello, welcome to Virginia U.S. Government. Today we're going to look at the legislative branch. So there's a couple essential questions that go with the legislative branch. The first is, how is the legislative branch organized and what role do committees play in the legislative process? And what are the expressed and implied powers that the Constitution of the United States of America grants to the legislative branch? And we should be able to answer those questions by the time we get to the end of this video. There's three terms to know. One is bicameral, and that's a legislative body of having two branches, like we have a House and the Senate. That's what is meant by bicameral. It's an example of bicameral. Express power is the power of the federal government that are specifically addressed in the Constitution. There's a synonym for this, another word, enumerated powers. So if you see enumerator or express powers, that means it's in the Constitution and it gives powers to the federal government. The next vocab word you should know is implied power, and that's powers of the federal government that go beyond the express powers, meaning that it's not explicitly stated in the Constitution, and we'll give you a couple examples a little bit later. So there's two houses of Congress in our national government. One is the Senate and one is the House. And this is in the Constitution, and this is the Great Compromise or the Connecticut Compromise, where the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan were combined, and you have equal representation, which is the Senate, and that's 100 members, because we have 50 states. So each state has two senators. And the House of Representatives is based on population, and so we have 435 members, which was set, I believe, in about the 1920s. And so each state's representation depends on their population. So in a larger populated state like California or Texas or Florida, you have more members than in a state, say like South Dakota or North Dakota or Wyoming or even Rhode Island, because it's fewer people. Congressional committees. So Congress is organized by committee, and what committees do is they're divided up by subject matter. So you have committees that look at like the Defense Department or defense authorization, so our national security, things like that. You have the Department of Homeland Security, and so you have a committee on Homeland Security in both the House and the Senate. You have the education committees, which looks at obviously the education of our country, and so it goes by subject. And there's what Congress does is they're divided like that because not every member of Congress can be an expert on every topic. So you divide and conquer. So you have committees. You sit on several committees, and you do the best you can to understand all the topics before you. In the House, it's a little harder because it's a mile wide and an inch deep of knowledge. In the Senate, it's a little easier because you're on fewer committees. And because of the large volume of work, committees are essential to the legislative process. So again, there's all kinds of bills that are introduced, and there's all kinds of things like oversight, where Congress oversees the executive branch, and they check on them, and they hold hearings to see how they're doing. So again, it's all divided up by subject matter, and you don't sit on every committee. You sit on several in the House and a few in the Senate, because it's easier to organize it like that. So here are the express powers. Again, express powers are powers that are, wait for it, that's right, in the Constitution, that are expressed or enumerated to give power to the legislative branch. So levy taxes means Congress can raise taxes, can tax you and me. Borrow money, they can borrow money if they so choose, and they do quite a bit. They can regulate commerce, and that's interstate commerce, so commerce between states. They can coin money, and they could declare war. The president can deploy troops, but only Congress can declare war. And they can establish post offices. That's one of the other enumerated powers. So that's why we have post offices. So those are just a few. There's a few others, but those are a few just to give you an idea and examples of what express powers are given to Congress. Now then, we have implied powers. Implied powers of Congress allow it to do all things necessary and proper to carry out its express powers. This is known as the necessary and proper clause or the elastic clause in the Constitution. And so these aren't enumerated, but what they do is they say, well, since Congress has this enumerated power, it through the necessary and proper clause, it can do X and Y. So they can regulate food and drugs, meaning that they can approve what's approve new drugs that are on the market, or take drugs that are dangerous off the market, or declare drugs are legal. Some drugs are legal, some drugs are illegal. Alcohol is legal, marijuana is illegal federally. This is being recorded in 2018. That may change in a few years. They can build interstate highways. So there's no enumerated provision in the Constitution that says they can do it, but through the necessary and proper clause, yes, they can. They can also protect consumers. So if there's something dangerous, such as a certain type of car or a certain type of thing that's out on the market and it's dangerous to the consumers, they can have that item or that car taken off the market because they are protecting consumers. They can ban things because through the necessary and proper clause they can do that. Checks of the legislative branch. So we have three branches of government: the executive branch or the presidency, the court system or judicial branch, the legislative branch, also known as Congress, and each one can check on the other. So this is part of checks and balances. So here are the checks of the legislative branch on the executive branch. They can override a presidential veto. They can impeach and convict a president. They approve treaties or not approve treaties, and they can approve presidential appointments or not approve presidential appointments. So those are just a few of the checks by the legislative branch on the executive branch. The legislative branch can also check the judicial branch by approving or not approving federal judges or justices. They can also impeach and convict judges or justices. Those are just a couple things they could do over the executive or the judicial branch. Separation of powers. So government power is distributed among the three branches of the government. Each branch is independent of one another. And although there's a separation of power, each branch participates in the functions of the other two through a system of checks and balances. So it's a fairly ingenious system to where not all power is given to one branch and the others have power to check on the other branches. All right, so we're getting to the end. So here's your practice questions. Sorry, just one tonight. Which are express powers of Congress? A. Appoint ambassadors, declare war, and veto bills. B. Declare war, coin money, and regulate commerce. C. Veto bills, coin money, and declare war. D. Grant pardons, veto bills, and deploy troops. I'll give you a moment to figure out which one you think is the correct answer. 3, 2, 1. Here you go. That's right. Declare war, coin money, and regulate commerce. Those are express powers of Congress. So it means it's on the Constitution. It says they can do those things. So let's go back to one of our essential questions, and that was how is the legislative branch organized and what role do committees play in the legislative process? Committees are organized by subject matter, and because of the large volume of work, committees are essential to the legislative process. Because again, if every member of Congress had to read through every single bill and work through its markup and the editing process, nothing would get done. Literally nothing would get done. The second essential question was, what are the expressed and implied powers of the Constitution of the United States of America that are granted to the legislative branch? Well, you have two. You have express powers and implied powers. And again, express powers, levy taxes, borrow money, regulate commerce, coin money, declare war, and establish post offices. There's a few others. The implied powers, through the necessary and proper clause, allow it to do all things necessary and proper to carry out its express powers, such as regulate food and drug, build interstate highways, etc. And that's it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Good luck to you.